No, I won't, no, I won't stay in my lane. Don't, no, I don't stay in my lane. No, I won't, no, I won't stay in my lane. Don't, no, I don't.
Was there an offer in this case?
There was. They had offered 100,000
And the verdict was
800,000. So
nice.
it felt.
You're listening to Sari Swear on the Sari Swears podcast. Welcome to another episode of Sari Swears. I'm here with guest Shaun Lieser. Did I say that right? Lieser?
Lieser. Shaun Lieser.
I always want to say
Yeah.
leisure, like leisure suit, even though we know each other and have for a while now. And I'm also here with my French Bulldog wearing a French Bulldog sweater. So those weirdos that watch podcasts, I don't get this watching podcasting, but if you wanted to come see it, you could see the sweater and the dog that inspired the sweater. So welcome to Shaun. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to chat with you. So Shaun, tell us where you practice and if you have a specialty or if you do all sorts of things. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I practice in St. Louis, Missouri is our primary office, but we have an office over in Southern Illinois. And we've also been trying cases throughout the country, which has been pretty exciting. And in the St. Louis area, I will say being called a leisure isn't a bad thing because it used to be a mafia family. So there was a lot of respect that came with that name. So I'll
With
take it
leisure,
sometimes.
Yeah, I always spell it wrong. And then you have the Shaun spelled weirdly too. So, you know, you're kind of like me. I always tell people my first name was weird and then I married a French guy and just screwed everybody up. But
Yeah, I'm always spelling both my names. But back to your original question, I primarily handle personal injury cases and mostly catastrophic automobile and trucking cases.
Okay. So when you say we, do you own your own firm and who are you practicing with?
So Alex
gotta-
Lamb is an associate here at my firm. He's the only other attorney. And then we have two paralegals. So we're a small but mighty firm, as we like to say.
Love it. Love it. Okay. So before we get into your recent case win, we're really here to talk about the transformation that you've seen since kind of getting into the H2H world. So let's start by talking about, you know, how did you come to H2H? How did that journey start for you?
Well, it started with your book. And I don't know if it was a trial guide email that I received where it was highlighting the book. But in any case, I ended up ordering it and I read it in a day or two. And what really drew me to it was the idea that we're trying to be inclusive rather than exclusive, but mostly it was the freedom that I feel like it gave attorneys to be themselves. And that was what drew me to it the most, that trying to emulate other people, really, we just have to emulate ourselves. And that really the jury is making the decision. We're just being the messenger. And having that freedom made it a lot more fun. It takes the pressure off a little bit. And it was just a different way to look at it. And I think that finding out that it's okay to trust the jury is really
Yeah.
one of the biggest lessons that I took from it.
Well, talk to me a little bit about this sense of having to emulate others. I think a lot of trial attorneys struggle with that. Where do you think that comes from?
I think we live in a world of too much information. It doesn't matter if you're buying a TV or a microphone for a podcast, you're comparing them to 18 different ones because we have so much access to info. There's so many books out there. There's so many, no offense, podcasts, but there's so many different people that you feel that, you know, okay, I learned it this way from this person. Now I can learn a little more that way. I can get better here. And it's really difficult to just be comfortable with yourself because we're always confronted with other ways, other methods, or other styles.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that when I really start getting known in this world that people were drawn to is I came out of the gate saying, I'm not going to give you a formula. I'm not going to give you the right way to do trial. Of course, we have the H2H method and I think it works, but the main thing that I think needs to work, quote unquote, is you. And so often when I'm working with my trial attorneys, I'm getting rid of things so that who they are, can come through and shine through, versus adding things to them to do. And of course, there's skills that you guys are learning, but so much of it is really finding out who the real Shaun is or who the real whoever is. So we had kind of an interesting moment with that because you ended up emailing me and then asking, and we decided to coach together, and you came out to do a trial lab, and that seemed like it was a really big moment for you because everything's kind of changed after that. So let's talk a little bit about what happened when you were out here at our trial lab.
Well, the trial lab was such a intimate workshop. There were only a few of us, and we were working directly with you. And I think it gave us the freedom to be ourselves. I noticed with the other participants, we would the first go round when we did our first jury selection, we were maybe a little buttoned up
Mm-hmm.
because we were, everyone might have been in their heads a little bit. But when you went the second time, you had that total freedom to try new things, to be yourself. And I think it really paid off. But the other aspect of it was starting out with the mindset training and
Yes.
being very open about our individual fears, or maybe, and I think it's at the beginning of your book, talking about not being good enough. I think it was the first
Yes.
quote right out of the gate. There's always that fear. And I think the permission to be yourself, to try new things, not only allows you to practice it, but it gives people a lot of confidence when they see how it pays off.
Yeah. And I did start with, and we do start with mindset right in that morning. And I'm always struck by how vulnerable everyone is to share. But I also am struck that when we are sharing our fears as trial lawyers in this world, that they're almost always the same, right? I'm not
Right.
good enough. Someone else is better. Someone else should do this case instead of me, so on and so forth. And I also find that when you're out here, and we say this, to everybody. In fact, we just had our damages seminar last week, and on the afternoon of the second day, I gave everybody about 45 minutes to go prepare like a mini kind of power of jury speech, kind of like the end of your closing. And before one of the participants came up to do his, he just said, "Fuck you, sorry," which of course I love. But then when we were completing, as you know, we do completion in a very specific way. He was so like, this was transformative. It was transformative that you made me do that, and I didn't feel 100% prepared. And I did it anyway, and I did it well. And I think that was one of the things that happened at the trial lab with you, is that you kind of, I watched it in real time. You kind of just let go and did your thing in jury selection. And it was, as we said, magic. I said, "You are magic." What did that feel like to kind of just let go of trying to, I wouldn't say you weren't trying to get something done, because you were, you had an idea of what you were trying to get, but there was something that happened for you that was just like freedom in the moment when I saw you in front of that second jury.
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to trust. And you can start out
Mm,
with trusting the jury, but really trusting yourself to get to where you need to go. Not worrying about a script, not worrying about doing it perfectly, but doing it
mm-hmm.
as yourself, and that you will get where you need to be. And then really it's just, instead of walking in there with an outline and the pressure to hit all the points, you just walk in there and have a conversation, and you're reacting as a person.
Yes.
And I think you had mentioned before how we talked about our fears. I think one
Mm-hmm.
of the cool parts about that program is that a lot of us do have the same or similar fears. So in that initial exercise, when you're talking about it, you're really bonding because you have those
Mm-hmm.
things in common, which is a great subtlety to what we're doing in jury selection, right? Like when we're talking to the
Mm-hmm.
jury, we're trying to find things that they might have in common, or really, in a way, show them things you have in common with them by talking to them like a person and not a lawyer. And when you
That's
can
right.
relax and be yourself, that really comes out. And it really came out for me on that final day.
Well, and I think too, we were calling you the trampoline, the human trampoline, if I remember correctly, because what happened, and this is such a benefit of when you kind of let go, and it's not just letting go like, okay, I'm going to go up here and do voir dire on some case that I don't know anything about. Y'all know your cases so well. This is what I continue to remind you. You know the points that we want to make sure that we get out, and those aren't defense points. Actually, those are our principles. And when you let go and you trust that, and so you said trust before, I think it's trusting your knowing about this. What that allows, and why it was so magical, is that someone would give you something and it was like boing, and you would just go naturally to this other thing, and then boing over to this other thing. And that's what we were all watching. We were like, who is this guy? I mean, it was just, there's no other word for it. It was magical as we watched it, but I don't think you could have done that if you had not been present and in the moment, instead of thinking like, oh my God, what do I do with that answer? Is that good? Is that bad? All the things that we talk about all the time around here. There is this self-trust piece around that. Would you agree?
Well, yeah, I completely agree. And I think part of it is presence throughout the whole trial. I think it starts
Mm,
in jury selection, and it really became fun. And I think
yes.
what helps the transformation is instead of hearing that bad answer and thinking in your head, okay, how do I get rid of this person? You start to transform into thinking, how do I shape this person or keep this person? And I don't mean shape in a
And
manipulative
or
way.
use this person, right?
Right. Yeah,
Even
because
if we
there's
get rid of them, we can use their answer to help the group as a whole.
Yeah, I think instead of fearing a bad answer, you have to come to
Mhm.
a point where there are no bad answers.
That's right.
It's a learning process. And where I used to, in our last trial, we had a liability question, and one of the jurors seemed like they would be horrible for me with the facts of the crash. But then I had a professional truck driver right behind him give another opinion. And instead of trying to strike the juror in front, I just said, after hearing that, does that shape or change how you were thinking about this? And if so, can you tell us why? And he said, absolutely. And he told us why. He ended up on our jury and afterwards was one of our biggest fans. And
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that because you don't have this myopic thought, right? Like, oh, one bad answer, that's it. It's I can use that. I can see. I can kind of hold that in my mind, see how the rest of it goes. I can ask if they agree, disagree. Yeah, that's what I think is so great when you are able to kind of release and you trust that you know the case and you trust that there's no such thing as a bad answer. You have all these different things that you can play with. And that's what we kind of saw you do in front of the jury. Let's go back in time before we talk about the actual case we're here to talk about.
sure,
You had tried a case with the H2H methods before you and I even had a personal connection. You'd bought the book and maybe you were listening to the podcast. Tell us a little bit about that one that kind of brought you kind of closer to reaching out to me and saying, hey, I want to work with you one on one, which is what we've been
sure.
doing.
That's right. And it's been great. It was about a year and a half ago. We had a case involving a needle stick where our client was going to a medical facility to pick up their medical waste. And he picked up a box that was unmarked, and needles, as he held it up, slid through and poked him in the stomach.
Oh my
So
gosh.
it was a case we took, and it was around for a while, but we took it a while ago because the liability was so egregious that we felt like the story had to be told. Luckily for him, he didn't contract anything, but it was a bag full of 50 to 100 needles. We had to go by the photos we had, but it just looked insane. And the thought that went through his mind of what he could have contracted, what he could have had, just to me, it was this should never happen. No medical facility should do this. And that was the first trial that I showed up really trying to be inclusive of all the jurors because it really resonated from the standpoint that we are on the side of the right, that
Hmm.
nobody could look at the photo we had of the loose needles and think anything other than that was horrific.
But
So
there's no damages. Why would you take that case to trial?
well, that case was all about liability and making things more safe and
Mm.
accountability. I think they offered us $3,000 or $4,000, maybe 20,000 at one point. I don't even remember, but the jury ended up awarding 65,000 for the no damages case, but then
Mhm.
$1 million in punitive. And it was a great
Amazing.
feeling. And everyone
Yes.
was on our side. I also think when you're trying to get rid of jurors out of the gate, you're kind of looking like you have something to hide or that you're trying to protect something.
Mm. That
But
is
when
such
you,
a great point.
it looks too
Because I just
defensive.
want to pause on that for a minute. Because I've
Okay.
been singing that tune forever about yours are not your enemy, but I've never had somebody put that in that way. That makes so much sense. Say more about that.
Well, it just feels like you're running from something. Okay, you're
Yes.
not with me, so I have to get rid of you folks, and let me show you all why I'm going to get rid of the ones because I'm afraid that they're not going to
Mm.
agree with us.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the other way, you had showed and taught us in trial lab how to confront some things head on because I think we've all been there where you have the juror that takes you down a rabbit hole that has
Yep.
nothing. It's a negative aspect of your case that has nothing to do with it. And out of respect for them, we used to let them go on and talk. But now hold on, wait a second. That I can tell you right now, that's not going to be an issue here. So you're
That's right.
starting to shape them down, showing them what is relevant, what they're going to have to really consider. And even if it's a negative opinion, then you just go ask somebody else and get them
Yes.
to talk about, well, what do you think about that? And then just counter it. And you're just showing them what they agree and disagree with, but you're not telling them.
That's right. And it's very different than I think what I keep saying how most of you have been trained, but when I talk to most of you, you're like, we have never been trained. We just kind of watch other people and read books and we do our best. But the prevailing thing out there is, okay, I hear this negative answer from this one juror. So then I'm going to let them talk, right? Because of course I want to hear more so I can get my cause challenge. And not only that, then I'm going to be like, who agrees with this juror? And then I'm going to have, 7 other people who agree. And then I got all those people off for cause. And so isn't that a good thing, Shaun? Why wouldn't we want to do that?
No, because it has nothing to do with your case. And you may be getting rid of people that completely agree with you, but they were taking down this rabbit hole that has nothing to do with what they're going to learn about as the trial goes on. And I think
Yes.
by who else agrees with that, and okay, so they all know you're getting rid of them. And again, it
Hmm.
really becomes like you have something to hide.
I love that. I love that. I've never really thought about it in that way, but it's so, so true. I think it changes everything. I've had Michael Cowan on the podcast. Of course, he was one of my first masterminds. And I hear the same things from those of you who've had, I should start calling it the transformation. It's like this moment when, the switch flips. And it's, two things is I'm not afraid of the jury anymore. I know that most of them want to do the right thing and they just need to know more about the case. And trial is fun again. Those are the two big things that seem to go hand in hand. So, but this was a fluke, right? This case of yours. I didn't, you didn't have any other good results. So let's talk about this case that kind of was after we've been coaching for a while after trial lab. You went and tried this case. Tell us a little bit about it and kind of your process with all of it.
Sure. So we had another one in between that we got another 7-figure verdict, and it felt really natural and really comfortable. But this last one we had about a month ago really opened it all up for me. And I gave myself, I trust for me is a big one, and I keep saying that, but it's mostly
Mm-hmm.
trusting myself.
Yep.
And I had been on a trip right before this trial, and I came back and had about 3 days. And of course, I knew about the case, but I came back and I trusted myself to be ready for it. And I can say this, and I don't know if this is good or bad, but it was the least that I prepared, but the most comfortable I've ever felt. And it was
Do
because
you, I was going to say, do
go
you
ahead.
think those things are correlated?
I think so. Because I think when we think that we need to prepare, 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 and over prepare, and I think that that's because we're nervous about something else or there's some underlying fear, 95% or more of the time, we know everything about our case. We're
That's right.
ready for the trial. We just think that you have to always be doing more and more and more rather than stepping back and just trusting yourself that you're going to handle it when you walk in. It's a lot
Well,
of,
and
go ahead. Sorry.
oh, no, go ahead. It's a lot of what?
I was just going to say it's similar to when the juror gives you a bad answer. You trust yourself that you're going to trampoline it or ping pong it back. Where it's just
Hmm.
like really a lot of the trial, you can't really have a script because as the trial goes, it kind of writes itself. Whether you're getting answers in jury selection that you give back in opening, or whether you're just learning some of the defense arguments in their opening that you're going to confront with your witnesses. It
That's
really
right.
is an evolving process.
And I think the one thing that you can walk in with without having to over prepare are the principles, the themes, the things that really truly matter. I think what happens when we over prepare is we are chasing every rabbit down the rabbit hole of defense points, right? They keep throwing these things up. We're like, oh my God, that's another thing I need to prepare for. And oh my God, that's another thing I need to prepare for. Instead of saying, no, 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 this is what my case is about. I stand on these principles. And yes, here's how I will deal with those various arguments. But a lot of the times we walk in with 67 defenses of their defenses and we have no unifying factor of why we're there, what this case is really about, because as you said, we stand on the side of the right and we forget that. It's like we go in there and our job is to defend the defenses, and that's not what our job is. So can you tell us a little bit about this case?
Yeah, so this involved a company that had a driver that was relatively new. He had been there for about 30 days, and his trainer or supervisor was in the car in the box truck with him, and he was pulling out to make a left turn and couldn't see oncoming traffic. In other words, couldn't see my client because there was a big truck there getting ready to turn and make a right turn into his parking lot. So the truck driver just waved him on out. And he accepted that as safe and took off. And my client T-boned into his truck and ended up with a
Mm,
severely fractured ankle that required surgery to repair. Um, but to the point about all the defenses, I mean, their whole argument was that, well, sure, you can rely. They waved him out. This is an accident. They happen. Part of the trust issue with the jury is that we just have to trust the jury to get it sometimes.
that's
That
right.
it's not okay to just pull out blindly. And
Hmm.
obviously, you make a few points, but the more that we buy into the thousand defenses or whatever they throw at the wall, it's distracting. It's
That's right.
it's distracting from what your client went through. It's distracting from what was actually done. And it's like I said earlier, in the world of so many choices with TVs, like when you start looking at 80 of them, you don't know which one you want. So we
That's right.
really have to focus and hone in. And by the time you get to closing, just trust that they get it,
Yeah.
that they understand this.
That's right. And that's what I said about persuasion, kind of what you said about, exclusionary voir dire is looking like you have something to hide. Persuasion, in my view, is like looking like something right. I need to really persuade you that it's not okay to just turn left into no, I don't. That's just fucking common sense. You
Right.
don't do that. And when you do that and you cause harm, you got to take responsibility for that harm. And I think there is something there. Oftentimes if not all the time, the biggest part of my job as a consultant is to help people simplify. It's so complicated oftentimes when people come into my office to work on a case because they're coming in with all of the what ifs. What if the defense says this? What if the defense says that? How do we around this? And I'm always trying to simplify that. Or when we're working on, for example, the teaching section in the presentation skills class, or one of the things we do here in the crew, and we're going through what they should be teaching on, y'all are complicating that and you're making this really complicated. And I'm like, isn't it just this? They should have, monitored and, stop or whatever, like really simple things. And they're like, but isn't that too simple? And I always say, no, it should feel like a duh to the jury. Like when you're teaching about, here's how you avoid this thing, the jury should be like, well, yeah, duh. It should be that simple because then it it makes it simple for them to go, well, why wouldn't they do that? And most of the time it's money, right? Well, because it's cheaper to do the other thing or because there's a money piece involved here. So simple is good, but we allow the defense, which is their job, totally. If you're a good defense attorney, your whole job is to distract, to throw stuff at the wall, to throw the balls and hope that we chase them down the rabbit holes and to get us off of our game. And my whole thing is, what's our case about? What can we stand in? The truth.
Right. And going in there with that plan to just focus on your side of the case. And I also think the jurors, I mean, they appreciate simplicity because they don't
Yes,
want their time to be wasted either. And
that's right.
that's, if you have the rogue juror that talks about an issue that isn't going to be in the case, it's okay to cut them off and say that's all
That's
right because
right.
everyone will appreciate that you're respecting their time.
Isn't that hard though for y'all? I mean, just speaking to that one piece, we do teach you how to manage the jury. We teach you how to form the group. First of all, I have so many TLCers in my group, and they love trial lawyers college, and nothing against trial lawyers college, but one of them consistently says, I am constantly being told I need to form the group, but I had no idea how to do that till I got to you. Like you actually show us how to form the group and how to know that they're formed. But what a lot of people don't understand is once a group is formed, you need to manage them and you have permission to manage them. And so if you have that one talkative juror, the juror that's going down the road that has nothing to do with your case, that not only do you have permission to stop them, but you should stop them. What do you think is the fear of nearly every attorney I've ever worked with to do that? You
Well,
guys
I
feel like you
think
can't do that.
Yeah, because we're afraid we're going to offend them, that we're going to cut them
Yes.
off and we're going to make them look stupid. But really, you're protecting them. Because if you let
Mm,
someone go on and on and on about something that everyone learns either had nothing to do with it, or right after that, you say, well, it has nothing to do with it, then I think, and when I've cut people off, I actually find that they appreciate it. And they'll say, okay, well, that was something that came to mind. And I'll say, well, of course. And that's a great point. It's just not one that you're going to see this week. So let's talk about this. And then you kind of shift it. And I feel like they respond really well because you're not letting them drone on about
That's right.
something that is irrelevant. And then they're back on the same page. And it's
And
really more a benefit.
And if it's an offensive juror, that one that is really, really bad for your case, why the fuck do you guys care if that person is feeling hurt? I think what you worry about is if the other jurors think that you are being unfair to that juror. But that again comes back to group dynamics, is that when the group is formed, they will tell you that they're annoyed with that person and they will give you permission to shut that person down. So there's a lot of those things that we can play with. So you were just coming back from Europe. You had like 3 days to kind of put your voir dire together. And what was it like actually doing the voir dire with these jurors?
Well, it was, like I said, it's very freeing for me to walk in. And the mindset piece is huge. I mean, I remember when we were at the trial lab and right before I walked out for the final one, Kevin came up and asked me, who's your favorite comedian? Bring him up to mind. And when you see
Mm,
them walk out on the stage, do they own it or they just kind of walk out there? And he said, own
mm,
it like they own it.
I
And I
love that.
remember going out there with a ton of energy and thinking I'm just going to talk. But when I went into this trial, I thought, the jury loves me. Like I have conversations
Yeah.
with them all the time. I have conversations with people all the time, and it goes really
Yeah.
well. Why would this be any different? And going out there with that mindset and kind of having a plan and a principle oriented jury selection,
Mm-hmm.
I find that they're shorter, they're more to the point,
Yep.
and it's making everyone feel like they want to be a part of it. I mean, the jurors that we had on this jury were so excited to partake in it. I'm not going to say all of them, but several of
Right.
them that talked to us after were really excited. And the best compliment I think that they gave was that they felt like I spoke with them, not at them, and that we were on the same team.
Did
And
you use any cause challenges or peremptories?
we had a couple cause challenges, not too many. I think there
Yeah.
were maybe four or five.
Okay.
And the first time I tried, we tried this inclusive jury selection. I remember when I only had, I think, two cause strikes, I thought, what are my friends going to think of me? Like, that is not enough. I didn't get enough. This wasn't a
I
great
know.
job.
It's like the notches in your belt. You got to have, all those cause challenges. And so in this case, first of all, how long did it take to try the case?
It was a day and a half. So we
I
started on,
love that.
yeah, it
That's
was
amazing.
very, very to the point, which I think was great. The judge kept things moving and things were on time, which is very helpful. So we added to the jury, I think around 2 o'clock.
You had it for 2 o'clock on day one or day two?
We started at 9 a.m. on Monday. Day two, I think we had it to the jury at 2 o'clock, and we had
I
a
love that.
verdict in about an hour and 10 minutes or so.
Well, like I say, long openings tend to send the message that this is really complex and confusing. Same with long trials, right? If we're spending days and days on something, it says, wow, there's really a lot here to comb through versus this is common sense, people. Was there an offer in this case?
They had offered 100,000
And the
and
verdict was
800,000. So
nice.
it felt really good. And the other thing that I like about it is about 45 days before the trial, we offered to resolve it for 650. And we
Mm-hmm.
said, that's it, pay that, or we'll try the case. And they chose to try it, and we got higher than that, which felt really good as well. And I
Of
think that
course.
it helps a lot too, like drawing that line in the sand sometimes, so that you can
Mm-hmm.
just focus on the trial and you know what your goal is and you know what you're there to do.
So, for our listeners, you've had the transformation. I'll start calling it this flip switch. What would be your number one advice to a trial lawyer, whether they are just starting out or they've been practicing for 30 years?
Number one piece of advice I think is to trust yourself and to
Mm,
be yourself. I mean, nobody is better than you at being you. And,
mm,
we coach our clients all the time when it's time for their deposition or to be at trial is to be themselves because people can spot it when you're trying to emulate or be somebody else. And when people try to do that, it comes off as phony and you don't trust them. I mean,
that's right.
there are a lot of great lawyers, there are a lot of great witnesses, a lot of great people. But I think what makes people great is when they are themselves. And I think if we can do that and feel that comfort, it comes across and it's 10 times more trustworthy.
Well, and I think too that it's difficult to do that. People are like, well, what does that even mean? And I think that's where mindset coaching comes in, which you've been doing for a couple years now. And that I think allows you to get to the place where it feels safe enough to be yourself and trust that yourself is enough. And that's why I love mindset coaching, because it's all about getting to who you really are and what you really want in your life. And, I don't know that you and I have hardly ever talked about trial stuff in our sessions. I mean, maybe we've debriefed here and there, but just doing the mindset training alone on even personal stuff, we see translates into the trial, because I will often notice that trial lawyers kind of have their like, this is Shaun in my personal life and there's Shaun in trial, right? They're two different people. And I think one thing that happens in mindset coaching is realizing that you can integrate those and you can be you everywhere. You don't have to be this mask or this person of what it means to be trial lawyer in court.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the best features of it, because when you have a juror tell you that they felt like we were all on the same team, or that you were
Mm-hmm.
just one of us. I mean, there's really nothing special about being a lawyer, but there are things that make you special about who you are as an individual. And when
Yes.
that comes across and you're just there as another member of the community, again, being a messenger, not trying to hit somebody over the head and tell them what they should feel or what they should think, that's another aspect that takes a lot of pressure off.
Yes.
We can't convince, or we can't change their beliefs or tell them how to feel. But what we can do is show them what happened. And, with a good case, we are on the side of the right. And if you end up with a verdict that goes against you, sometimes you just can't help it. But it's our
That's right.
job to convey it, not say it per se, not tell them what it is. And I think that's also incredibly freeing.
For sure. Your life, as you've told me, has changed so much in the space of a year. What would you say has been the biggest change for you?
I think it's the freedom and having fun with it, to not be so
Mm-hmm.
obsessed with being perfect, that knowing
Mm-hmm.
that nothing or nobody is perfect and it's not going to be perfect, but really that's what makes it fun. I used
Mm-hmm.
to, when people would ask me why I went to law school or why I became a lawyer, the real answer was because my dad was in the union and represented a lot of people that needed it, and fighting for their employment. So I saw that. But the other reason was I watched A Few Good Men. And I loved
Mm.
that movie, but my joke would always be, it's nothing like that in the courtroom. I thought it was like that, but that's TV. But in the last couple years, since it's become fun again, there are several moments that are kind of like that, because
Yes.
things don't go perfectly or they're not rehearsed and you have to improvise or be you on the spot. And there are some TV moments. And I think that's because, for the reason when I watched that movie, it looked fun. It has become fun again, and I'm really
Oh,
loving it.
I love that. Well, before we sign off, I know that, and I should have kept that in mind, that your kids will be listening to this. So I did swear, but I know that you already they already know that I swear. So is there anything you want to say to your kids or your beloved, because I know that they are so much a big part of your life?
Really put me on the spot. Well, I can say, just to make you feel better, kids and Alicia, I fucking love you. And you all are the best. And I'll tell you, some of the best advice I get is from Alicia and my kids. I mean, I love running a fact pattern by Rylan. And River's a little young, but sometimes her too, because the kids see it in the most simple ways and they give
Yes,
it to you
yes.
straight. And that's actually been a lot of fun for us to work together. And, Rylan told me that when he grows up, he wants to be a professional soccer player and a worker. And I said, "What's a worker?" And he said, "Someone at your office." And I thought, well, that sounds great.
Oh my
So
gosh. I love that.
yeah,
I
they're a
want my
big
I want
part
my
of my
kid to take
success.
over for me when I retire, but they're too busy becoming the next Billie Eilish or whatnot. So River and Rylan and Alicia, this man loves you. I can tell you that as his coach. And I know that it's going to be fun to hear that little shout out here on the podcast. Well, Shaun, thank you for being you. First of all, you are a delight. You are just so much fun to coach and to work with. But also, thank you for being on the podcast. And everybody, we will talk to you next week. Thanks so much.
Da 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 da.
And if you haven't already seen our freebie, 8 strategies for 8 figures, you can go to sariswears.com/8 strategies, the number 8 strategies. You get the first 3 for free. You got to pay, but not very much for the whole thing. But go get the first 3 and see if you like it. Ever wish you had a place to practice your trial skills and connect with other lawyers who get it and connect with me? Grab your seat in the H2H playground. It's where you get real coaching, community, and strategies to actually grow your practice. Head to sariswears.com/play and get enrolled. Until next time.